therapist to somebody else if I don't do the work. And I realized that very early on. Like, if I want to be authentic and show up for these people, I have to do the work. And so it was actually going to school to become a therapist that I searched out my first therapist. So that was in 2015. So broke my back in 2003. It took me a long time to actually sit down in front of a therapist and start doing the work for myself. Through that, I learned the process of healing. Like, I had a client ask me once, when is therapy over? And I think that that's a great question, right? When does therapy end for somebody? And the answer that kind of comes to me is when you can be your own therapist, right? Like, when you can stop and question yourself and challenge belief systems that you put into place and be willing to acknowledge mistakes you're making or ways that things are not working. Like, when you can really face yourself or have somebody else acknowledge something and you can then face it in yourself, I think that's when, you potentially don't need a therapist. I joke. There's two types of people, those who are in therapy and those who need therapy. And maybe that's just job assurance.
I just adore you. Yeah. I love everything that you say. I'm just like eating it up. So in my own little unique world of, being a drug addict, for instance, the way that this kind of translates to my own experience is that after a while they say the obsession is removed, and now I can manage myself. Like I do. I mean, obviously I'm a human being. We have emotions we're constantly on this roller coaster of emotions with ourselves, but I still have the ability to keep myself in check. And for me personally, my journey has been taking me to super deep Kundalini meditations where I've actually had these sessions where I'm just going to share this because I think this would be really interesting to kind of move towards this. But I've been seeing this vision in my meditation of this little child, like this little adorable little kid, like toddler, that's been like bouncing around me. Like I'm meditating on a hill and the sun's on my forehead, and there's like this little giggling baby that's like bouncing around me, like playing Ring Around the Rosie around me in my meditation. And I haven't known for months what that meant. I thought maybe I'll have a kid. I don't know what I thought. I just saw this kid, and it was like, that was my happy place in a weird way. And so anyway, recently, it was just last week, I had this really deep Kundalini session, and I realized that in that moment that was me, that child was me, and it took me a couple more days to actually go back to that little kid and pick that kid up and just hug that kid. It was like the higher version of myself acknowledging this younger version. But going back to that, like, that was when I identified being free, and so it was just like such a deep moment for me. I mean, I just bawled. I bawled my eyes out, and I'm like that tough girl. Like, no, I'm not gonna fucking cry. I'm not gonna be vulnerable. Like, fuck that. I'm together. I've got my shit together, So anyway, it was just an interesting experience that I wanted to share. So what are your, now you can analyze me there.
Oh God, I wouldn't dream of it. Here's what I will say. I think that kind of work is really powerful. I mean, I had a similar experience where I was meditating, and this like 13-year-old version of me was standing in front of me, and she was just my 13-year-old version of me was just this sassy, bitchy, like passive-aggressive, angry kid. And like, she stood in front of me and she basically said, like, you have done the work that you need to do. You created me as a way to protect you because you couldn't find your voice. And now I see that you found your voice, and now I don't have to stand in front of you anymore. I can stand beside you. And I think that there's something really beautiful and powerful in that, because when we can forgive our younger selves, when we can make peace with the younger versions of ourselves that we are maybe not super happy with, then we can really get complete with our past to be present. Like, if we carry our past around with us so heavily that it distorts and taints our present well-being, then we can't really be present.
Right.
And so, I love your story, and thank you for sharing that, because it's so true. Like, we have to get complete with those old pieces of ourselves and love those pieces of ourselves so we can truly be present in this moment and happy.
I love the way that you said that, how you said earlier, you identified as an able-bodied person, because that totally ties into kind of what we're talking about now. It's like, what are we choosing to identify with as human beings? And there's so many different aspects to the human experience, you know, like, and so many people I see, especially in my current time-space reality, like I see really close friends of mine who are struggling, and with mostly, ironically, the ones that are really struggling with addiction and stuff like that are holding on to a lot of these old belief systems, you know, about themselves. And it's like, I don't know, I really truly have done the work. And the thing about me is that I'm still doing the work. And I realize now that this returning to myself, you know, that I will continually talk about in this show, it's like these different, I don't even know how to, it's like I have circles tattooed on my body, because I've always, I just always keep circling back around. You know, I just keep returning to myself. Yeah. For those of you who obviously cannot see her hand motions right now, with her blingy wheelchair, she's pointing out the circle of her wheel. And it's so true, because we're just going round and round and round. And each time we get around, we get a little bit more lucid and a little stronger and a little wiser. And so it's just like, life is such an interesting trip in that way. And it's like layers and layers and layers that you're adding on, and at the same time, layers and layers that you're taking off. So it's like this constant unveiling, and yet at the same time, it's this constant building of self that I think is really fascinating. So,
yeah, for me, it's not so much becoming who I'm meant to be. It's unbecoming everything I'm not to get back to who I really am.
I love that.
And part of that is shedding those past experiences that you carry as if they're, you know, merits of honor. Like, granted, like I can say, yeah, I've been through some shit, and I can also be the victim of saying that, like, oh, I've been through some shit, but that doesn't serve me. It doesn't make me happy or a better person or anything like that. It just keeps me stuck. And that's the piece. It's letting go of these things that you carry that you think you're justified in carrying, or they make you who you are. The truth is they're just things that happened in the past. And my friend says to me, would you go to yesterday's garbage for today's dinner? And I'm like, well, of course not. And he says, well, then why do you keep going to yesterday's emotional baggage and pain for today's emotional well-being?
I love that.
Right?
That's awesome. So, I mean, in your own experience, I mean, tell us kind of what your spirituality or your mantra has become, because obviously I see this, and I've seen all of the layers of you, and also the unbecoming of you, which has been beautiful thing to watch as your friend and as your number one supporter. But no, it's yeah, tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what are your actual fundamental beliefs about existence? How the fuck do you live? How can we live? How can we be better?
You know, I mean, for me, my one true mantra that I return to over and over again is all will evolve. And that's in every situation and every experience, everything will unfold as it's supposed to and as it will. You know, spiritually, you know, I've studied a lot of different religions, and I kind of see the general themes within religion, and I honor those. I've currently been reading and going through the Bhagavad Gita, and, you know, listening to Krishna Das, and sort of just beginning to listen to all these different people with different views and ideas. And so for me, it's my spiritual practice. It truly is, you know, you said it earlier, returning to myself. Well, when you realize that the thing you're searching for, and Krishna Das says this, right? You so want to have a partner. We'll use that as an example. You want to love and be loved so deeply. But what if you realize that the one you really love that much, that person, that's inside of you, and you want to be with the one you love, and you want to, you know, hang out with the one you love and laugh with the one you love. And when you realize that that's inside of you, you said it earlier, returning home. That's what my spiritual practice has become, is because I felt trapped in this body that doesn't work right. I have avoided this body. I've used substances, I've used sex, I've used all sorts of different things to avoid being in my physical body. But when I return to my body, when I return home to where my soul resides, every single time I turn inward and I really center myself, I cry, because it's like I'm returning home again and again. And there's never shame there. There's never anger. There's never judgment. There is just love.
So just to go back to what I was saying about the meditation that I was doing, I was clinging to this belief, I think, when I first saw the child emerging, that maybe there was something deep from my childhood that I felt like I wasn't worthy or I wasn't good enough, that I felt like stemmed from a very deep age of feeling like I just wasn't worth it. And I clung to that being, for some reason, that maybe I needed to go do all this inner child work and past whatever trauma work so I could find out what was the root cause of me feeling like I wasn't worth it. And in that moment of my meditation, realizing that little child was me, and that it was up to me and the older, wiser version of myself to pick myself up and love myself and honor myself and all of these different parts of my existence, literally. It was just like the most empowering feeling. And it was, again, that sense of returning to something that I know so well, which is myself. And for me, I have also used drugs and sex and rock and roll, whatever, to just not so much get away from myself as much as just like enhance the experience, because I'm just a diehard party girl and I like to fucking rock and roll and have sex and do drugs and whatever. But recently I've, taken a huge step back. I've been single for like almost a year now, Jesus. And so it's been really an interesting trip to be able to give myself that type of validation for myself. Now, my question to you is, we all seek some type of validation, right? So I guess for me, it's okay for me to give I'm totally fine. I love it. I love being with myself. I fucking enjoy myself. I know myself. I like to be able to be free like that and just be a free spirit and not have to worry about all that bullshit right now. But it does feel nice when there's somebody that I have a lot of respect for, somebody who I actually genuinely give a fuck about their opinion, compliments me and says, hey, you know what, like that was inspiring. Or even if it's just a random stranger, somebody I don't know who sees what I'm trying to do, not the outside shell, in any sexual way, but just like, hey, wow, hey, like today I had somebody reach out and say that they listened to the podcast and they actually quoted something out of the podcast. And I was like, wow, that was exactly the whole point. The whole point is to touch people's souls. So whose opinion do you care about? And how do you continually give yourself validation? And what is that?
Yeah.
What is that for you?
So I have, in the last year and a half, I have expanded deeply into my spirituality and into a relationship with myself. And through that sort of shift in the sort of vibrational frequency that I put out to the world, I started to realize that there were people in my life that no longer were in alignment with where I was at, right? And so I have done some weeding and pruning, we'll say, in my personal life to narrow it down to a very select few people. Your family is one of those, groups of people that matter to me, that has been there. Your little sister's been my best friend for 23 years, right? So she matters to me, and what she has to say matters to me. My family, my mom, my dad, my sister, my stepmom. My stepmom was driving the car that broke my back. Needless to say, I blamed her. And then I forgave her because it wasn't her fault. It was an accident. And through that, she is one of my favorite people. I have so much love and respect for that woman because she had to put up with me being terribly hurt and mean to her because of my own pain. So all of the people in my life, be it your little sister or be it my stepmom or the other friends in my life, I have people in my life who are willing to show up wholeheartedly and be vulnerable and authentic and call me on my shit, even if it's scary, even if they know that I may not react well at first, whatever it is. I surround myself with the people that push me to be the best version of myself.
So it's interesting that throughout this whole process of anybody I interview or talk to, or even just life in general, it is my deep belief that it's literally